Her game. I'm Laura Stickells. We've got Natalie Noury here again today. We've got a really fun episode planned. We're going to talk a lot of women's basketball. We have Talia Goodman coming on in just about 15 minutes or so. She's a women's basketball reporter covering the WNBA and women's college hoops, and she's still a student at Indiana University, so I'm really excited to catch up with her, kind of just learn how she balances everything. Yeah. But first, we need to talk about the women's celebration game yesterday at Fenway Park because that was so special. It's the end of summer. You know, we joked because we're both wearing black today. I'm like, oh, you said we're mourning the end of summer, but it was fun to get to celebrate women to kind of start to wrap up the regular season here. And our very own co-host, Sophia, was one of the women that was honored at the start of the game. She got to throw out the first pitch alongside four other remarkable women. I'm sure she threw it straight down the middle. I have no doubt that it was a strike.
Mean four seam.
Yeah. But I actually kind of wanted to start the show there because I have some thoughts on like being honored and throwing the first pitch. But I wanted to get your thoughts before I share mine.
Yeah, I mean, throwing the first pitch I think is pretty cool. It's funny because in Worcester, whenever like we know someone is about to throw the first pitch, they always kind of joke about it like, oh man, I hope it's just aimed correctly, or I hope it lands in the glove or something. But I think regardless, you kind of just have to own the moment. I mean, if someone asked me to do the first pitch, which probably will never happen, I think it would just be fun, an opportunity, just be like, just shoot it straight, throw it straight, and I don't know, pretty cool for her to get honored and be at, because how often do you think she gets to go to Fenway Park? Sophia's always at the TD Garden, so I thought that was pretty cool.
I mean, I'm glad that you would think of it as a fun experience. Yeah. I would be terrified. Like, if somebody asked me to throw the first pitch at Fenway Park, I mean, I would feel like I needed to say yes because it is such a fun experience. I would be so scared. You have one pitch to get it right. Yep. And everybody's looking at you. And I've talked to other like players pitchers who have pitched professionally. And they have said like they never get more nervous than if they're ever asked to throw a first pitch somewhere. Yeah. Because there's so much pressure on you, so many eyes on you.
That's true.
So, you know, unfortunately, I don't think you have to worry about it. Every time I've brought this up in the past, people have humbled me and reminded me like, Laura, why is anybody going to be asking you to throw out the first pitch?
Maybe one day we'll be out there.
Yeah, maybe one day. But no, Sophia did a great job. Even Danielle Marmer, she, you know, the GM for PWHL Boston, she also threw out a first pitch. And Jemai interviewed her, and she said, my heart rate was higher than like it's ever been. She said that she was more nervous to throw out the first pitch at Fenway Park than she was to draft a PWHL team.
That's such a unique point too, the heart rate, because like we all have Apple Watches now or something like a Fitbit or whatever, and I remember, oh God, it must have been like my first game in arena hosting at the TD Garden. I think I looked at my heart rate and it was like over 100 beats per minute. And normally like I have a pretty fast, high heart rate anyways. So I bet you like that's a wicked good point in this circumstance, because it's like to know how like nervous you get, how your heart rate is adjusted through it, and then like how your body performs when your body's doing that internally. It's like, yes, the more that we're talking about this, the more I'm like, I might actually be pretty nervous for something like that. But there were like 5 of them doing it at once, right? It was like a decent group. You had some support. It wasn't one-on-one.
Yes. Although honestly, I was thinking about that. I'm like, I don't know, does that make it better? Does it make it worse?
Yeah, I know. Maybe it takes the pressure off.
They all crushed it. When I was watching the replays of it, you couldn't actually see the strike zone in the shot, which if I remember throwing out a first pitch, please frame it up like that. I don't want people to be able to see where that ball ends up. But they all did an amazing job. It was really great to see them be honored like that. But the headline of the night was our friends of the pod, Rylee, Pay, and Emma Tiedemann. Both were on the call in the Red Sox booth last night. Made history, became the first female duo ever to call multiple innings of a Red Sox game. And not only did they make history, they absolutely crushed it. And my biggest takeaway just from listening to them and the whole experience is that if you want to bring more women to the game of baseball, put more women in positions in the booth, because listening to them was just like delightful.
Yeah, no, I thought they did an amazing job, and honestly, I was so happy for them too, just to see like where they both started and where they've come. And it's like to be there with Dave O'Brien, Kevin Youkilis, first of all, legendary, cool duo to be with. But they came on and they spoke so like eloquently, so professionally, and it's almost like you weren't expecting any difference from AA Portland to the Boston Red Sox. But like the way that they were able to take over so seamlessly, that was like really impressive. And it made my heart happy because, Tom Caron was interviewing them before the game and they were just talking about things that they were excited for. And it made me very happy just to see them have and earn this opportunity. And it was just like, they sounded like they've been doing it for years, which they have, but with a professional level on a scale like that at Fenway Park, it was amazing.
I think something too that I just took away from this, obviously, like I love listening to, Dave O'Brien, obviously Tyler Murray and all of the guys down in Worcester who do such an amazing job calling games, and they're, some of the best in the business. But listening to some women get to call games, like it's just fun. Like it just like as a woman, it feels like you're hanging out with your friends at the ballpark, and it takes it to just kind of a different level. It's a different experience. It's something that you really don't get to experience much. And this was one of the first times that I got to experience listening to a woman call a game, and it was truly just so much fun. And they had such great banter too. With, Dave and Uke, and there was a moment when they said that, they have to pull the tarp in Portland.
Yes, yeah.
And Dave was like, oh my God, really?
He said, you have to pull the tarp.
Yeah, he was truly you could tell that Dave was shook by the fact that they have to pull the tarp. But no, that's minor league baseball, and they've clearly worked so hard to get an opportunity where they can sit in the booth in Fenway and have that experience. So special. And I was really happy for Rylee. She got to call that Jarren Duran home run, and it was such a great call. Like, it was honestly a really good call. And I remember just thinking, like, wow, like, going into this game, I'm sure both of those women were like, I hope I get to call, like, a home run or something like that. And she got the moment, and she crushed it. So good job to both of them. Were there any other moments that kind of, like, stuck out to you from their call?
Well, I think, like, everything that you just mentioned was awesome, too, because, like, pregame when they were talking to TC, they were like, oh, like the opportunity to call a big play is just it would be like the cherry on top. And I know that's something they've said a lot, but there's a lot of cherries on top of their career so far. And this had to have been one of the best moments of their career to date, because we know that there's going to be more down the line. But for them to be able to have a play like that, first of all, Jarren Duran had a hell of a game. I mean, that guy was on freaking fire. So for them to be able to call those plays, to call that home run, I know Rylee was looking for a Mickey Gasper hit. I think we were too. The parents were. That was great. And also, I loved how every time Gasper was at the plate, they pulled up like a double screen of the parents. It was almost like Rylee kind of helped manufacture this productional moment of like, okay, Gasper's up, like let's make this a moment on TV. But it was just really cool. So for that to happen, I remember I was in the bathroom actually like brushing my teeth or something, and my brother, who I kind of nominated as to watch the game while I stepped away, I was like, let me know if something happens, and he yells, Natalie, Duran hit a home run. So I ran back in, I rewinded the TV, and I was like, okay, who called it? Who got to call it? Like that's awesome. So that was wicked cool to see. And I think the Gasper moment was cool just because we had him in AAA for a little bit, and it was cool to see Rylee and Emma see that full circle moment for someone who started in AA.
And off the top of the broadcast, both Rylee and Emma spoke about what it meant to them to be able to call a game at Fenway Park.
A little bit of history in the booth as well, as Rylee Pay and I will be joining Dave O'Brien, Kevin Youkilis, and Jemiah Webster on the broadcast. Rylee, what does this moment mean for you?
It means everything to be able to cover these prospects at the minor league level, AA prospects coming up, hoping to make their big league debut. It'll be really special for us to sit down today, take a second in the booth, look down at Fenway Park, and see it all through their eyes as well.
And Fenway, a little bit different than Hammock Field up in Portland, Maine, but very excited to call a Major League Baseball game here, part of...
Pretty awesome.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. I've been in the booth a couple times this season in Worcester doing some radio broadcasting, a little bit of color commentary, and listening to them kind of it actually inspired me. I'm like, you know what? They're so good at this. Like, I want to get back in the booth. I want to do a little bit more color and expand my skill set that way because, I mean, they're so cool. Like, I want to be like them, you know?
Yeah, and something I think Will Middlebrooks put a story out, and he said, I can't wait to show this to my daughters one day. And I thought that was such like a powerful, really cool moment to see. It's just like someone that, you know, we kind of grew up watching playing and then entered this realm of broadcast, and then his arm around, you know, our two friends and saying, I can't wait to show my daughters. That's cool. That's like a full circle moment when you get to see like the kids can now look up to you. And I'm sure that's how they feel. But you brought up a good point, like being in the booth. Like I did a little color commentary for hockey back in college. And it was so different than reporting, but I loved it. I mean, hockey's fast, so that was a little intimidating, and I didn't really know like timing of things, where to step in, what to do. But announcing was always something that was like a little intimidating to me because we never really saw a lot of women doing it. If anything, when you think about a woman on a broadcast team, it was always the reporter. And granted, like that's, you know, I love doing that job, but it's cool to see that it's becoming more normalized and little girls can grow up and see these things and say, oh, I can do that too. And I think that's kind of the biggest takeaway for me.
Yeah, me too. And I think this is a perfect segue because something that we both wanted to talk about in this episode is we're about to welcome Talia Goodman on here in a couple of minutes, who's just beginning her career in broadcasting and journalism. So cool. Are things that we both kind of wish that we knew when we were starting out in the industry. And one of those things for me was like, you're never going to feel fully prepared. You're never going to feel fully ready for a moment. And I think you feel a lot of additional pressure, especially as a woman who has to speak with authority sometimes in the industry, and feel like sometimes you get maybe questioned a little bit more than men. And knowing that like you don't need to know everything, you don't need to feel like you don't have to be able to coach the team in order to be able to do a good job on the broadcast. And that's one of the things that I actually wish I knew.
Yeah, and I think like someone like me would get really hung up on credibility. Like I want to sound like I can talk their language because hockey was something that I grew up with. I felt like that was something I was very like natural speaking conversationally, I guess. But baseball for me was a bit of an adjustment because I didn't really know like the lingo or the verbiage. So when I like entered that realm, I was like, oh boy, I need to, you know, not get caught up on this, but keep it simple. And that was one of my points too, is just kind of like, a lot of people told me the acronyms, like keep it simple, stupid. It's the KISS acronym, or, you know, bullet point things, that kind of stuff. It's like those were really good pieces of information that that helped me in my job and not like get overly caught up on that kind of stuff. But something that I also like wanted to talk about was there's a ton of value in knowing the productional side of a broadcast. In college, not only was I reporting and stuff, but I also ran cameras. I was directing, running replays. And because of that, I was able to see what they do in the control room and how me as the reporter can kind of be like
make your lives easier.
Yeah, like how can I do this to make it easier for you guys so you're not having to press a bunch of buttons or whatever. So I thought like the productional side of things is really good to know if you're getting into this line of work.
I would totally agree with that. And I agree with what you said about the KISS acronym.
Yeah.
There's actually something so there's this movie, Stick It. It's like a gymnastics movie.
Yeah.
Came out when I was a kid. And the coach in that movie, his like go-to phrase is clean, safe routines guaranteed to stick. Yeah. And like the girls in the movie, they want to throw these like tough tricks that they can't end up landing. Yep. And the coach is always like, nope, stick to clean, safe routines guaranteed to stick. And sometimes when I find myself like starting to struggle on a broadcast, or I'm like, oh man, like my hits just aren't going the way I want them to, I'm like, okay, I think back to that. I'm like, Laura, you got to do a clean, safe routine guaranteed to stick.
That's awesome
like,
that you can remember that too.
Get your confidence back. You know what? If you're just starting out, take it back to 20 seconds. Like it doesn't have to be, I mean, it honestly shouldn't be like a 1 minute long hit. Like that's, you can't really do that as a sideline reporter. So scale it back, make it just 20 seconds, make it a simple thing that you know you can nail, and use that to build your confidence and move forward. So if you're starting out, think about, maybe watch that movie, Stick It, clean, safe routines guaranteed to stick.
Yeah. No, I think that's great. And I think like you're right. Like I was also a news reporter, and we did like really long hits sometimes where you had to describe a moment or whatever. And then when I came back to the sports side of things, I was like things move a lot quicker here. Like I have 20-25 seconds to get a hockey hit in or something like that. You just have to and you're right, if you put too many stats, names, that always seems to trip me up. Stats or names in it, or you want to really fill in the blanks, it's like it becomes long, you trip yourself up. So when you kind of like boil it down to like a 20-second thing that every sentence can tell the story, so you can stop at any point too if necessary, that's huge to know. I think something else for me was, as a student, work-life balance and entering especially the freelance realm that was like a stage, you know, in our careers. Learning how to have a social life, a personal life, a professional life, and also keep yourself healthy is still something that I work on to this day. So it's something to expect. It's definitely something that you have to anticipate, but I don't know. I don't know if you have any tricks for how you do it.
Oh, no, I don't. But one thing that actually I heard somebody say recently was everybody has their own definition of work-life balance.
Yeah.
And you can't let everybody else's definition apply to you. And for me, like, I really enjoy working a lot.
Yeah.
And a lot of my
fun.
friends are at work, and I don't mind going to work all the time. I know I should also, make sure I'm checking with my family and everything. But I listened to Caroline Klein, actually. She's the Chief Communications Officer with the Utah Jazz and the Utah hockey team, and she did like a keynote speaker talk last year at BU, and this was right after she hosted the All-Star game. They hosted the All-Star game in Utah, and she was like, honestly, like, everybody's work-life balance is different. She's like, I probably worked every single day for the past 3 months preparing for this All-Star game, and then I went, and then, I could go on a three-week vacation later.
Right.
Everybody's definition of what work-life balance means is different, and just finding out what works for you. So I think that's one thing, too. If you really want to get into this industry and you feel like it fits you, don't let other people like guilt you into feeling bad for going to work because you enjoy it. Not everybody gets to love their careers as much as we
you're
do.
right. You're so right. And like, I hear enough people complain about going to work. The only thing I complain about is like sleep deprivation or no coffee, but it's because I love what I do, and going to work every day, it doesn't feel like work because it's so much fun, but it is like, okay, will I have time to work out today? Probably not. So it's like finding the nutritional balance, all that can be difficult. But something else that I did want to bring up, which I know that you have a personal experience with as well, is sometimes you really do have to take a chance on yourself, put all your eggs in a basket, relocate somewhere possibly, and really just take a chance on yourself and trust the process, because it gets frustrating. But if you love what you do, I think that's more of a win than most people have.
Certainly. I'm so excited to talk to Talia Goodman now, kind of ask her some of the things that she wished she knew. She's standing by, so we'll bring her on right now. We're so excited to welcome on Talia Goodman to Respect Her Game. She just is starting her junior year at Indiana University. She just told us that it's her first day of classes, right? And she also is an amazing women's basketball reporter covering college hoops. So we're so excited to talk women's basketball with you, Talia. Welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me on, guys. This is very exciting.
How are your first day of classes going? Let's kick it off there.
It's been good. I only got 2 today, so not too bad, but an early start to my day. So I woke up around 8 a.m. and go. So it's been good.
So you also launched the On3 women's vertical, right, for that On3 platform. I mean, that is a huge responsibility. You did that in May. How have the last 3 months been going for you?
They've been great. I mean, it's really, really awesome that On3 took the initiative to launch a women's vertical, because there aren't that many sites doing it. And obviously the traction that women's sports is gaining right now is so impressive. So it was very, very, very cool. And I'm very honored that they thought of me for this. So the last 3 months have been busy doing a lot of women's basketball recruiting stuff, some traveling, and getting ready for the college basketball season, which I think everyone is going to really enjoy this year.
Wow, I don't know how you're going to balance all that. I'm sure you're a pro at this point with everything that's on your plate. That's amazing. For those who might not know what On3 is, could you kind of introduce us to what it is and what you do?
Yeah, so On3 is an online company that is really at the forefront of recruiting news, is what the specialty is, but also is phenomenal at covering college news and breaking news and kind of a little bit of everything. And they've been doing basketball and football on the men's side for a few years now, and then just added a women's sports vertical. So I'm kind of leading the charge right now on women's basketball, but they also just acquired Softball America, which is really cool. So lots of softball coverage. They got some volleyball, some gymnastics, and really just letting fans in on recruiting news, where everyone's at. And it's been fun kind of getting to do this as a junior in college is something I never thought I'd be doing, but it's very, very awesome to get to work with them.
You've already done so much in your career, because I saw that you were also a beat reporter for the Carolina Hurricanes. You've been doing this for a while. So how did you really become passionate about sports and realize this is what you wanted to do for a career?
Yeah, so when I was a kid, I honestly had no interest in it and thought I would never end up doing this in a million years. I thought I was going to be an actress, which was a far-fetched dream and never would have happened. But I kind of followed my dad around. He's a men's basketball reporter, and so I was following him around as a kid a lot. And at first, when I would go to games with him, I would bring a book and I would read the entire time. I would not even watch the games. I had no interest. But as I grew up and got into high school, I realized that this job is kind of another stage. stage, and not acting, but it's another way of it a little bit. You're still storytelling, but you're telling the stories of other people, which is the part of it that I really love. And so, going around with him to games and being able to interview players gave me kind of a sneak peek of what I love. And then I fell in love with hockey, actually, and started covering the Canes a little bit. And then when I got to college, it really all just kind of jump-started, and I fell in love with women's basketball completely, and have loved working with this sport and helping tell the stories of these athletes and coaches.
Well, you're in good company because we're both hockey lovers.
Indeed. Yeah, I love that part of it. But honestly, I never got to cover too much basketball in my career so far. But another thing I want to bring up is the fact that not a lot of us get to grow up with TV personalities in their home. I mean, my parents definitely don't do anything related. So what was it like for you growing up with your father kind of being there as this influence? And do you have like maybe an earliest memory where you felt the passion start to grow for this career path?
I think for me, it was probably my sophomore year of high school. Once I'd kind of decided that I wanted to get into this, my dad brought me to a Celtics game as a fan. It was actually, I think, only the second Celtics game I'd ever been to, and I'd lived in Boston my whole life pretty much. And I went there, and we went back after the game, and I thought I was just going to go back and meet some players, which was so cool as it was, right? But then my dad let me interview Jason Tatum, which I don't think I realized how cool that was in the moment even, but now I look back at it, and I'm like, one of my first interviews I ever did is with Jason Tatum. Like, I don't know. I think that was kind of the moment that I realized that I wasn't good. Trust me, I was not good then. But that was the moment I realized that I could be good, and it was really fun for me to kind of feel that high pressure situation, especially not knowing I was going to be doing it beforehand. But it was great growing up in a house with someone who has done this. Like, the amount of times that I still call my dad every single day with questions is so helpful. Like, it has got to be no less than 5 times a day. I'm like, hey, what do I do right now? Like, how do I solve this situation? Can you look at this before I tweet it? Whatever it may be. And so it's been really helpful, and obviously a very unique experience growing up with my dad covering men's college basketball.
What's some of the best advice that he's given you?
I think the biggest thing is just make sure you're 100% accurate before you put anything out, because there are a lot of people who kind of just, you hear something and you believe it's true and you think you can just have one source because you trust that source so much. But I think the biggest thing is making sure, you're checking with multiple sources and you're 100% positive on what you're putting out, because your credibility is the most important thing to help you keep your job and get new jobs in the future. And these people trust what they see online from you, and you want them to trust you. So I think that's the biggest thing that I've learned from him. But there are just so many things. Like, when I tell you, I talk to him every day and I feel like I learned something new.
Well, Talia, I've related to a lot of what you said, especially when you said, I wasn't really interested in pursuing this as a career until high school. I was the same way. I never really became interested in sports kind of until high school. But I'm curious for you, what your dad's reaction was when you came to him and you were, reading the books in the stands for so many years and you're like, actually, this is what I want to do. How did he react?
No, he literally laughs. Like, to this day, he was here a few weeks ago. I have my wisdom teeth out. So he was here and we were walking by Assembly Hall and he was like, this is just so weird for me. Like, the first game that we covered together, I was covering men's basketball last year for my school. And he was like, this is so weird to be here, like, doing this together. Like, you hated sports. Like, what is this world? This is like an alternate universe. My mom is even the same way. She's like, who are you? Like, this is not my daughter. I feel like we switched daughters at the age of 15.
That's awesome. Well, something I wanted to ask you about is, I guess we were talking about that work-life balance. Laura and I were talking about that a little bit earlier. And then you as a college student, you're doing so much. And I think like the main question I want to ask you is, how do you balance all of this? What is your day-to-day like, especially now, junior year?
Not very well. I'm working on it. It's hard. Like, I heard you guys talking about it before. It is definitely hard because I am someone who loves to work. Like, I love what I do. I love to work. I want to be the best version of myself I can be within work. But being in college, it's definitely tough. I mean, I'm, taking 4 classes right now. I'm doing some sideline reporting for Big Ten Plus as well. I'm covering our volleyball team here alongside having this gig covering National Women's Basketball and trying to have a social life and all of that. So it definitely is challenging, but I think the biggest thing is just time management, and kind of what works for me is just scheduling everything out on my notes app when I wake up every morning or before I go to bed, and finding the time I have to go to the gym or go for a walk or hang out with friends or like whatever it may be. But if I don't do that, I find myself working like 12 hours a day because I'm just like passionate about it, and I want to make sure that I am doing the best I can, especially, being newer to this women's basketball world. I want to prove that I'm, passionate about it and love it, and will do everything I can to help, do what I can to grow the game as much as I can.
Well, that's super admirable, and I want you to know that a lot of people are going to take notice at this hustle that you're developing at such a young age to balance not only being a student, passing classes, passing exams, but also going on live TV or doing those kinds of things. It's like, for me, I went to the University of New Hampshire, and I was reporting while I was a student, but Friday, Saturday nights, I was at the hockey rink or doing a football game instead of going out with my friends. So there are some things that you might have to kind of put on the back burner, but I want you to know that, like, the effort and the hustle that you're developing right now will definitely help you succeed, because we always talk about like thinning the herd. Like, a lot of people want to do this line of work, but they just can't commit to it because of that lack of time. But regarding your college, do you have like a broadcast program through your university? I'm not familiar. So like, is there like a newsroom, or how do you do it at school?
Yeah, so it's actually one of the best sports media programs in the country, which is why I, decided to come here, and I love it. And there's so many kind of educational in-class opportunities. It's a sports media program, so there's a bunch of specialized classes I'm even in right now, but it's more about what they offer outside of the classes than anything. They have so many things you can do. I'm part of this organization called the Hoosier Network, which is fully student run, and it's a multimedia company where they kind of give everyone a beat to be on. So when I first got here freshman year, I was on women's soccer and women's basketball. And so every year, and then last year I was on volleyball, this year I'm on volleyball. So everyone gets assigned a beat, but there's also a TV station here. There's a newsroom here. There's Big Ten Plus, which is my favorite part of it, which means you get to be on live TV. And I've done some sideline reporting for them, and getting that on-air experience is like unprecedented. So there are so many opportunities in Indiana, which is why I decided to come here. And of course, like, there are so many other great broadcast schools, but I think the education that you get here is like second to none.
Something that I always like to ask women that are still, or men, anybody that's still reporting in college sports as a college student themselves, is what's that dynamic like? Because I remember when I was a college student and I was working for the Stanford Daily writing stories, and on Monday I would be interviewing an athlete, and then on Tuesday I would be sitting next to them in like calculus or Spanish class, and it's kind of this interesting dynamic. So what's it been like for you?
I don't know. I think I try to keep it as separate as I possibly can, just because that's something that my dad also taught me, is like, obviously you don't want that conflict of interest to ever come into play, but for sure it's funny when I'm like sitting right next to a volleyball player after I just covered a match of theirs, like in class. Like, of course I'll say hi and be friendly because we're the same age, right? Like, we're the exact same age. We're in kind of a similar spot where, every time you're in a match, I'm in a match too with you. So it definitely is an interesting dynamic, but I think it's more interesting that I only cover women's sports, so I feel like it's more to be like friendly and have more of that like friend vibe with the women's athletes, even just as you're covering them too.
That's a lot of fun, and I found that was like, I don't know, sometimes like I guess covering women's sports, it's like you kind of get to have more of like a friendship with them. I covered like all male sports basically probably until last year or this year. I started doing more women's sports. And I found that every time that I was going to like the venue that they were playing, they would say hi to me pregame. They would compliment my shoes, like, oh my gosh, where'd you get your suit, or something like that. And I felt like there was a lot more camaraderie that was able to be had between the media and the players. So for you, what's that dynamic like, and why is it so encouraging to cover women's sports?
I think it's just the fact that a lot of women's sports haven't had the coverage that men's sports have had in the past, right? So they maybe appreciate it more or enjoy it more because it's just not something that they're used to. And so that was, one of the main reasons that I wanted to cover women's sports, is because I've seen what men's basketball has had for the last however many years I've been alive, right? And been around the sport. I've seen what they've had, even things like the transfer portal tracker that my dad started up like however many years ago. So I see those things, and I see the hole that's missing and the gap that's missing in the women's game, and want to do kind of what I can to bring it over. And I think the women's game is just really appreciative of that effort, not just for me. There are so many other people who are part of this, but I think they're just really appreciative of it and want that camaraderie with the media members because they're just not used to that kind of coverage.
Mm-hmm. What do you think is the next step for taking the media coverage from the women's side to make it more on par with the men's side?
Yeah, I think it's just accessibility from talking to, various coaches in the country, all over the country. The big thing is just making sure games are free and available, like the men's games are. Like over Thanksgiving, some of the best games are on Flow Hoops, which costs a lot of money, and like no shade there, but like it's hard to get people invested when they can't even easily access the games on kind of the major networks that they're already paying to have, right? So I think that's the first step. And then just the media coverage being at a higher level, like ESPN. I think there are talks at certain places about getting like a fully women's basketball show going on, and I think that's a really important step because I think the interest is there, and I think people are seeing that. There was a game last night, a WNBA game with Angel Reese in it. No Caitlin Clark, just Angel Reese and AJ Wilson, and it surpassed 1 million viewers, I think. And so the interest is definitely there. I think it always has been there, but we need to embrace it more in order to let it grow further.
Now, did I see correctly? Was it last year you worked the Final Four, Sweet 16, Elite 8, all that stuff? What was that like for you? That must have been amazing.
It was so much fun. I mean, I had been to a couple men's tournaments with my dad, but it was nothing like this. Just being able to be there by myself and feel like a full-fledged reporter, right? And I was covering Indiana until they got knocked out, and then I covered kind of the national scene with The Next, who's another phenomenal company that I work with who covers just solely women's basketball. And it was so cool, like just being able to drive there all by myself and be able to be in a room with Dawn Staley, right? It is something very cool, and being able to see them have that undefeated season is something I'll never forget. But it was a phenomenal experience. I covered every round of the NCAA tournament, and I hope to do that again this year.
Well, Talia, you said that you were in the room with all of the real reporters. You are a real reporter, too. And if you're a student journalist watching this, you are a real reporter, because truly some of the best reporters that are covering college sports are students. I kid you not. Some of you guys are so talented, and I always just want to encourage you to see yourself as on peer with the people that are getting paid to do it, because you're just as good as them and you have just as bright of a future. So you're a real reporter too. Make sure you always call yourself that. But I want to ask you, kind of going into this season, I mean, I was kind of floored when you're like, oh yeah, I'm starting classes again. I was like, oh my gosh, like football and basketball and hockey, like it's really right here. So what are some storylines that people should be looking out for this season going into women's college basketball?
Well, I think this is my hot take, and I got kind of crushed for this, but I think that USC, not South Carolina, the other USC, is the best team in the country right now, on paper at least, with what they have. They have the best freshman class coming in. They have Juju Watkins, who I think is the best player in the country. Maybe Paige Beckers. They're very neck and neck right now, but they have them. Then they added 2 transfers. They had Kiki Iriafen from Stanford, who's one of the best post players in the country. Then they had Talia Van Olhoffen from Oregon State. Like, they are just absolutely loaded on paper. And yes, chemistry is a big thing. South Carolina definitely leads in that department, but I think the battle between the 2 USCs is maybe the biggest storyline of this season. But then there are also just a bunch of really great players coming back from injury. I think the most notable for me is Rory Harmon at Texas, which is another team that absolutely has the potential to win the whole thing this season. So there are just so many storylines between, freshmen who are now sophomores and Audie Crooks and Hannah Hidalgo. There are just so many players that are going to steal the show this year. It's not just going to be one. And there are plenty of teams that are going to get the national coverage that maybe just Iowa and South Carolina were getting last year, which I think is a really exciting thing to see.
Well, I love that you brought up USC, because that is a Pac-12 school, and there was obviously a major shakeup, not just in college football and men's college basketball, but literally in every sport, especially I think in the women's sports within the Pac-12, because women's sports were so strong within that conference, and you've seen all of those schools now distribute and go to different conferences. So which conference do you think got the most stronger, I suppose, after this big conference shakeup and realignment that we've seen?
It's definitely the Big Ten. I mean, USC and UCLA are my top 2 teams in the Big Ten right now, and obviously both came from the Pac-12. So that conference is deep right now, but those 2 teams are clearly ahead of the pack as far as that goes. I think the Big 12 maybe benefited a little bit too, but the upper half of the Big Ten is definitely those 2 teams, and even Oregon is such a wild card too. Like, they could easily be a top 5 or 6 team in the Big Ten this year. And even Washington returns almost everyone. So I think it definitely benefited the Big Ten competition-wise, and there are going to be some really tough matchups this year.
Now I wanted to ask about this, of course. You got to work with Caitlin Clark a little bit, too, in your career so far. What was it like getting to interview her, work with her, and to see how far she's come since graduating college?
It was very cool. I fortunately had the opportunity to cover her last 5 college games, which is something that like not a lot of people can say, and I think it's a very cool experience that I had. And then I also covered her first WNBA game. So being able to see that shift from, it was only like 3 weeks apart or whatever it was, but it was very cool to just see how calm, collected she remains in these situations. I think that's what sticks out to me the most is just, yes, she's well media trained, but I think it's just also who she is. Like, she is just the easiest person to talk to. She always says the right thing, very good sportsmanship. And so it's been really fun talking to her. And obviously, you know, the first time you talk to Caitlin Clark, it's a little nerve wracking, of course. But she just is, she's a game changer, right? Like, she has changed the landscape of women's college basketball and now the WNBA. And I think we're in like an unprecedented time right now, and I'm very lucky to have gotten in this at what is seemingly the right time right now.
I'm curious what it's like for you, because I know you do a lot of recruiting coverage as well, and there's not a lot of people out there that do recruiting coverage within, you know, high school sports, in any sport, especially within women's basketball. So what's it like to be one of the only people out there doing that?
It's very cool. Honestly, I had never done it before I got this job on 3, and you're right, like there's not a lot of other people out there doing it too. So it's interesting seeing the difference, you know, talking to high schoolers and how they interact and what they're looking for, what's important to them in a school, and just kind of learning about these players before they get to college. And now I know them when they're freshmen. I'm like, oh, like I'm able to do my job better as a college basketball reporter because I'm following the recruiting landscape. And even just, I went to several events this summer in Louisville, Chicago, and Indy, where I am. And it was very cool to just be able to get kind of a sneak peek at who I think are going to be college basketball's biggest stars in a few years.
This is so interesting. It's crazy what you're doing. The travel, the reporting, the recruiting, what have you. It's amazing. What part do you feel like maybe has surprised you the most that you've really developed a passion for through just doing it?
Oh, I don't know. I think
it's a loaded question.
All of it was kind of a surprise to me that I really enjoy all of this. But I think the recruiting stuff I have been, you know, surprisingly enjoying more than I thought, because I'd never done it before. Mm-hmm. And just being able to go to these events and like the rush of it all, like I feel like I'm running around all day like a crazy person, which is kind of what I enjoy most about covering sports, is kind of, which sounds weird, but like the stress of it all, I love. And so being in those kind of high energy environments all day for like 3 days in a row from, I don't know how coaches do it. Like it really is like 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. every single day for like 2 weeks long. And I went along with them. I was on the recruiting trail this summer. So, it was really fun just being able to talk to the players and get a glimpse at kind of what they're like at this level. But it's all been fun. And I think the other part that I enjoy more than I thought, which makes sense due to that, is the breaking news section of it all. The high stress environment of that is also something that I enjoy.
Well, Talia, everything that you've said in this interview has been so relatable. I also really enjoy the high stress environment of it. You've been such a joy to talk to, and I can tell that you're going to have such a bright future in this industry. So thank you so much for coming on Respect Your Game today.
Good for you,
Thank
Talia.
you guys so much for having me.
Truly what I said there at the end, like Talia, she's one of the most relatable interviews I think that we've done so far in this podcast. And I would like to get your kind of reaction too, because we both were reporters in college, and getting to see how she's kind of moving through the industry. I mean, it seems like she's doing it so well and so professionally. Everything she said, I'm like, wow, you're like a real pro. But what was your biggest takeaway from that?
I mean, it's good to hear that like students are dedicating themselves to this, because that's truly what it takes, is like the hustle, the time commitment. I think she's so professional already. The fact that she's talking about conflicts of interest. It's like the hard thing about
that stuck out to me too. I was like, you know what you're talking about for sure. You're really taking this seriously.
that was really good to hear. And honestly, kudos to her dad for taking the initiative on that point. Because unfortunately, you know, some people they join the industry for the wrong reasons and they really want to be friends with people, and it's good to be friends with people, but the fact is you do have to remain that professionality. And the approach she has, the way she explained it all, it's like, she's got her head on the wow, how do you say that? Head on her shoulders in the right way. Yeah, there we go. Coffee is needed.
Yeah, we're getting to the end of the episode. Get us off air.
I'm like, wow.
No, I'm just kidding.
Speak, Natalie. No, but I think she's great. She's got her head in the right place. It's just enlightening to hear that teenagers, however old she is, they have an idea and they want to stick to the game plan and just do it right.
Yeah. I loved what she said too about interviewing Jason Tatum.
Yeah.
It was like one of the first interviews she ever did, and she like wasn't even really nervous because she didn't know kind of what like how big of a deal that was. And I think kind of it reminds me too, like the farther I've gone into this career, almost the more pressure I put on myself to perform and do well, because you realize like you care so much and you've been putting so much into this career and you want to be so perfect all the time. But when you're just starting out, you kind of have that like freedom and you're just doing it for fun and you're just trying to kind of, see what works. And I think that was kind of a good reminder. Bring it back. Just remember why you started and kind of the feelings that you had when you started. You're just trying to figure out what works, and don't put too much pressure on yourself. It's an interview with Jason Tatum, but at the end of the day, he's just another basketball player.
Plus, I think the best way, her dad had the right approach there too, just like threw her into it. She didn't know what she was doing. I think the best way to learn is just by doing it. And sometimes when you get thrown to the wolves, you end up, leading the pack, whatever that quote says. But I think she obviously has some great role models in her life. When I was a student at UNH, there were a few other students, at Hockey East schools doing the same thing. And it was great to see this community of students doing the job, doing the work, doing class, all that stuff. And I give a lot of credit to people who can commit to that, because like there were a lot of people, a lot of friends I made who ended up leaving the industry, or they stuck to it and they're in some really successful places now. So I think as long as you maintain that hustle and all that, I think you've got the right path ahead of you, and she does, obviously.
Yeah, and I meant what I said when I said that some of the best reporters covering college sports are students, because to your point, when I go to Hockey East schools and I'm covering games, I always try to make sure that I'm connecting with the students, because they do such a good job. And I want them to realize, I'm like, no, you do have a future in this industry. Like the stuff that you're putting out even as a student is on par with the rest of the industry. Right. So I mean, student journalists, they're amazing, and I wish that everybody supported them. Okay, we're going to move into wins of the week here before we jump off air. I can get us started. So mine's actually kind of like a golf win, and it's a little different. So I follow this golf influencer. Her name is Haley Buchholz. I follow her on Instagram. If you're looking to get into the game of golf, definitely check her out. She's got, a very aesthetic vibe going on. It is very inspiring. It makes me want to become a golf girl. But she actually played in the Pro-Am for the BMW Pro-Am last week. And she was one of the only women playing in the Pro-Am. It was like, the celebrities play with the pros, and she was one of the celebrities. And she birdied on 16. And they had this video of her when she did this, and just the joy and how much she was just the love that she showed. And what's interesting too about her story is she used to play golf at Elon, and then she stopped for a while, just because I think especially, playing college golf, there's a lot of pressure on you. And even as being like a college athlete myself, you sometimes lose the passion for your sport after that, and you're just like, I just want to be done. But she's found her way back into golf over the past few years. It's been really trying to enjoy it, and seeing her go out there and now competing in tournaments again and truly enjoying herself and getting that exciting moment on 16 in front of the grandstands and everybody cheering her on. And even I think there was somebody that said like, yay, women's sports, was like clapping her on. Oh man, that's awesome. Or clapping her on. We're having trouble cheering her on. That was such a great moment.
Oh my gosh. Well, that's great. Talk about performing under pressure too. You got all the stands there. Haven't played golf maybe competitively in a while, and then pulling off a birdie. That's amazing. Yeah. Good for her. Maybe I'll look into it. I don't follow too many influencers, but I'll get into it.
If you want to get into golf, follow her.
I love golf. Golf's a great sport. Mine's about the U.S. Open tennis that started on Monday this week. I wanted to talk a little bit about Madison Keys. Now, she's 29. She's been playing, I think her first major accomplishment was when she was 15, 16 years old. But this season, 2024, has been a bit difficult for her. Missed the Australian Open with an injury. She had an injury at Wimbledon, just a minor setback. But she prioritized her health pulled out of the 2024 Olympics in Paris so that she could compete in the U.S. Open. And she kind of said, at 29 years old, my body isn't what it used to be. In order to preserve my career, my health, and all those kinds of things, I do need to kind of pace out my season differently. And unfortunately, these athletes, your bodies can only hold up to that level for so long, which is a really harsh reality sometimes. But for someone to be able to prioritize their career, their health, and really put them in a situation to succeed, I think is a testament to the mental endurance and the mental strength a lot of athletes you don't really get to see because it's all in here. But she really prioritized her season, and she said, okay, well, I'll have to sit a couple of things out that I have done in the past that have been amazing for me. But in order to do what I want and for my future, I'm going to have to make sure that I take care of myself. And I think that's probably a hard thing to come to terms with. And maybe you can, add to this, because I think as an athlete, I stopped after high school. I don't know what it's like in college, but I think it's just a testament to mental strength and deciding what's good for you and doing what's best. So I think that's a win for the week, is just like a woman in sports really kind of speaking out on something that's very important. And sometimes certain things have to take a backseat in order for you to succeed elsewhere.
Well, I think it's even related to the conversation we had earlier, just about work-life balance, about finding that balance between pushing yourself athletically and realizing that you still have the rest of your life ahead of you. I remember when I was at Stanford and I was rowing, I was in a lot of pain a lot of the time, and you just push through it because it's like, well, my career is not going to go on past my experience at Stanford, so you can just give everything you have for the time that you're there, and then it's over. But for these professional athletes, they can give as much as they can for as long as they can until their body kind of gives out. So I would imagine it's much more of a weighing of the pros and cons. So I love that you brought that up. I think that's a really great win.
Yeah, I mean, I knew a lot of D1 skiers in college, and they would go through injuries, and the worst part about it was mentally. It's like, I want to get back to it. Physically, I want to be doing these things, but mentally, I can't rush myself through this process. So sometimes, I don't know, just hearing that mental side of things is really important, I think, in sports, whether you're a man or a woman. I think the fact that she kind of talked about it and redefined success in her own terms was really inspiring. I think she won her first match, so good for her. She's already doing well. But yeah, I think, and you brought up a great point, so thank you for sharing that. And it's sports take a lot. They take a toll on your body, that's for sure.
Definitely. Well, next week, I'm looking forward to talking about more U.S. Open stuff, especially the outfits. The outfits at the U.S. Open are always so fun.
Love them.
Yeah, we'll definitely talk about that next week, and we'll have so much more on the next episode of Respect Your Game. Thank you so much for joining us.